It was raining. I was 22, and my home, the small, dingy apartment I worked 3 jobs to keep, was officially gone. My landlord, Mr. Vernon, watched from his window. When I looked up, I saw his sneering face, a man who saw me not as a human being, but as a temporary inconvenience. His last words to me were chilling. "Find a cheaper place, Maria. You were never going to make it here anyway." That night, sleeping in my beat-up car, I didn't feel despair. I felt a cold, sharp realization. The greatest power in this world is ownership. Vernon had power over me because he owned the deed. I made a vow right there. I wouldn't just survive this eviction. I would use the anger, the shame, and the utter disrespect to fuel an obsession. I wasn't just going to buy a home someday. I was going to buy his building. And years later, when he tried to cross my threshold again, the tables would be turned with perfect, satisfying cruelty. Hello, everyone. My name is Maria, and I'm 30 years old. This story is for anyone who has ever faced housing insecurity, that terrifying, gut-wrenching realization that the roof over your head is not yours, but a temporary privilege controlled by someone who doesn't care about you. It's a story rooted in the injustice of class and ownership. The pain of that eviction was profound. It wasn't just losing an apartment. It was losing my stability, my sense of safety, and my dignity. That memory became my driving force, the engine that ran every extra shift, every saved tip, and every calculated investment. I learned that real revenge isn't about vandalism or shouting. It's about building something so successful that your former oppressor eventually needs you. If you've ever dreamed of serving justice to someone who took your stability away, I need you to hit that like button, subscribe, and prepare yourself. This is the story of how an evicted tenant became a property mogul. So let's begin. My early 20s were a blur of hard work. I was putting myself through community college while working 2 restaurant jobs and a weekend gig cleaning offices. I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment in a decent, older building. It was modest, but it was mine. My landlord was Mr. Leonard Vernon. Vernon was a classic absentee landlord, greasy, arrogant, and fundamentally neglectful. He owned several properties around town and saw them purely as cash flow, not homes for actual people. The conflict was typical, but deeply frustrating. The heating broke every winter. The roof leaked every spring. When I politely asked for repairs, Vernon's response was always the same. "Vernon, it's an old building, Maria. Deal with it. If you want luxury, pay luxury prices. You're lucky to have this space." His lack of respect for my tenants' rights and my persistent effort to pay the rent on time felt like a continuous, subtle assault on my dignity. The eviction, greed and disregard. The actual eviction wasn't caused by my failure to pay rent. It was caused by Vernon's greed. He decided the area was gentrifying faster than he anticipated. He wanted to do a quick, cheap renovation to raise the rent significantly. To do that, he needed the building empty. He used a legal loophole, a spurious claim about structural inspection, to force all tenants out with a 30-day notice. It was legal, but it was morally disgusting. I confronted him in his office. My hands were shaking, and I remember my voice cracking with desperation. "Mr. Vernon, I've lived here for 2 years. I've never missed a payment. I work so hard just to afford this. Please just let me stay until I finish my classes. He stared at me from behind his giant, cluttered desk, a smirk playing on his lips. Vernon, personal problems are not my problems, Maria. This is business. You were always just temporary filler until the real money moved in. You have 48 hours to vacate. And frankly, people like you need to realize your rent is always someone else's investment opportunity. Go find a cheaper place. You were never going to make it here anyway. The last sentence was the absolute low point. It wasn't just eviction, it was a personal attack on my potential. I felt the sharp, sickening realization of my powerlessness, that one single greedy man could destroy my life with the stroke of a pen. That night, forced to load my few belongings into the back of my car, the cold, heavy weight of the injustice settled in my chest. I couldn't scream at him. I couldn't fight the lawyers. I could only promise myself that one day I would own the ultimate weapon, the deed. For the next 6 months, I lived a nomadic life, sleeping in my car for weeks, staying on friends' couches, and taking every available shift. The instability was terrifying. The constant anxiety about where I would sleep was a physical ache, but that fear became a constant, high-octane fuel. Vernon's sneer was my constant mental image. Every time I was exhausted, every time I considered giving up on college, I heard his voice. You were never going to make it here anyway. My revenge plan became my sole focus, overriding all exhaustion. I wasn't just saving for an apartment. I was saving for a down payment. I changed my work entirely. I focused on high-tip, late-night shifts at a fancy downtown restaurant. I worked 70 hours a week, and every single dollar that wasn't spent on bare necessities went straight into a savings account. My internal monologue was obsessive. He thinks I'm replaceable filler. I will become the foundation. He sees tenants. I see opportunity. He focuses on rent. I focus on equity. I devoured every book and seminar I could find on real estate and personal finance. I didn't have a business degree, but I had the strongest motivation in the world, the desire to never be homeless again because of another Vernon. I learned that Vernon's strategy of quick, greedy flips was fundamentally unstable. The real wealth was in long-term, affordable, and well-managed property. I bought my first property, a tiny, rundown duplex far outside the city center, 3 years after the eviction. It was a miserable piece of work, covered in mold and needing everything. But the moment I signed the deed, I felt the shift of power. I poured my entire life into that property. I learned plumbing, drywall, and electrical work. I turned it into a clean, safe, and reasonably priced home, renting out the second unit to help cover the mortgage. I was a landlord, but I was the exact opposite of Vernon. I treated my tenants with dignity. My business, Maria's Homes, grew slowly and meticulously. I saved the rental income, reinvested the profit, and within 5 years, I owned 4 properties, small, well-managed, affordable buildings that provided stability to others, the very thing Vernon had denied me. My attention never truly left my original neighborhood. I kept track of Vernon's building. As time went on, his quick flip strategy backfired. He had done cheap renovations, attracted high turnover, and the building fell into disrepair again. The area continued to gentrify, and Vernon's building, now a rundown eyesore, was dragging down property values. Then, the ultimate opportunity arose. Vernon over-leveraged on a bad investment, was forced to sell the building. The moment I saw the listing, a cold, fierce joy flooded through me. I called my broker immediately. I didn't tell anyone why this property was so important. The bidding war was tough, but because the building was structurally neglected, my offer, backed by solid financing from my portfolio, was ultimately accepted. I bought Leonard Vernon's building, the building I was evicted from 8 years earlier. The moment the deed was mine, I demolished the old, poorly maintained structure. I didn't care about a quick profit. This project was personal. I spent the next year building a new, modern, energy-efficient apartment complex in its place. I called it the Phoenix. It was sleek, beautiful, and dedicated entirely to affordable, dignified housing, the kind of home Vernon never would have allowed. My project was highly publicized in the local business journals, a story of a young, self-made female developer providing community value. Vernon, meanwhile, was falling apart. His other properties were failing, and his once charming arrogance had curdled into desperation. Then the cosmic joke landed on my desk. A leasing application for one of the new, highly sought-after, affordable units in the Phoenix came across my desk. I recognized the name immediately, even though it was spelled slightly differently. Leonard V. Vernon. He was financially ruined, his credit was shot, and he was desperately looking for a reasonably priced place to live in the neighborhood he thought he owned. He was applying to live in the building he once forced me out of. I stared at the application. The paper felt heavy, carrying years of injustice. I didn't feel rage. I felt a chilling, absolute calm. I took the application, walked to my office, and meticulously reviewed his credit score, his previous eviction history from properties he owned, indicating financial irresponsibility, and his current financial status. Under the section marked Decision, I checked the box Denied. The official rejection letter was automatically printed with the reason: applicant does not meet minimum credit and tenant history criteria. I personally signed the bottom of the denial letter as the managing partner of Maria's Homes. A week later, the denial letter was delivered to Leonard Vernon's last known address. I imagined the moment he opened the rejection, the humiliation, the realization that the system had finally turned on him. He had been rejected by the very business structure he used to oppress others. I sat in my office in the Phoenix, the magnificent new building that now occupied the land where he once sneered at me. I held the copy of the signed denial letter. I didn't send a personal note. I didn't need to rub it in. The official rejection, the cold language of the market he worshipped, was the perfect weapon. As I filed the document, I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the city lights. I whispered the words I never got to say the day he evicted me, but which were now undeniably true. Some tenants, I whispered, my voice thick with finality, don't deserve second chances. My revenge was complete. It wasn't loud, it wasn't petty. It was a massive, tangible asset that provided stability to others, and it was a permanent rejection of the man who thought I was temporary. I was no longer evicted. I was the owner. My revenge stood tall, in brick and glass, on the very soil where my dignity was once crushed. The Phoenix isn't just a successful property development. It's a monument to resilience. The initial eviction was the most terrifying thing that ever happened to me. but it became the most valuable lesson. Vernon thought he was teaching me a lesson about the real estate market. He was. He taught me that if you want true security, you have to control the means of production, or in this case, the means of housing. I learned that when someone tries to make you feel powerless, you must channel that feeling not into destructive rage, but into constructive obsession. I didn't just survive. I mastered the very game he used to exploit me. My focus now is building ethical, stable housing communities. I treat my tenants with the fairness I was denied. I have broken the cycle of greedy, absentee ownership. The greatest satisfaction wasn't denying Vernon the apartment. It was realizing that I had become the gatekeeper of the very stability he needed, and that my success was built on the foundation of his failure and greed. If this story gave you chills, if you believe in the power of resilience to defeat arrogant power, please smash that like button and subscribe to my channel. We discuss how to use life's biggest setbacks as stepping stones to financial freedom every week. I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what is the biggest injustice you ever faced that ultimately became your greatest motivation? Hit that notification bell to join our community. And always remember, the house they kick you out of is just your first lesson in buying the block.